Is this thing on? Okay, we're all good. Sorry for the last one. We are going to be getting into another patch notes, and this patch notes is huge. So bear with me on this one. I'm going to be talking about all of the talents, but I will be trying to skip through this a little bit faster, talking about how it's going to affect the meta, if these are big changes or if these are small changes, and then go from there. So we're going to try to shoot through this as fast as possible, while also still hitting the major points that you should know from this patch. So right off the bat, they did add in new bundles that are going to be adding in more skins and more different things for mounts, for example. So there are new skins for Zagara, for Falstad, for Phoenix, and then they are adding the new Reaver mounts. I will give you guys a quick spotlight of some of these. The new Reaver's a little slug mount. Kind of just slugs along. It's pretty cool. It comes in 3 different colors. There's new skins for Phoenix, as well as there are new skins for Zagara, as well as a new skin for Falstad. This Falstad skin is pretty cool, but it is considered a legendary, so it does have themed abilities too, though. So we'll check that out. If you do want to see all of these, I'll do a little bit of a shout out to a smaller YouTuber who's been doing spotlights for all of these skins. Check out Game Over Bros. I'll see if I can get a link in the description. If not, someone can toss it in the comments down below, and we'll just give an update there. That way, if you guys want to check out those, do that. Check it out in game or check it out there. But in order to save time, I'm going to skip right past this, get into this ginormous patch that we have coming up. Starting off, Anub'arak's been dominant in the meta, and we've talked about this Beetle build. I was worried that it was going to get nerfed. It did get nerfed. The W build that I was talking about didn't really see a nerf other than the Cocoon changes. They are making Cocoon have less health, meaning it's going to be easier to break at the same time as it's going to naturally decay at a faster rate. On to Blaze. Blaze is overall just getting buffs on the majority of his talents, his abilities, including Bunker. Bunker's seeing a cooldown reduction and a mana cost reduction. So generally Blaze is seeing overall buffs, which is interesting because he has been seeing a lot of competitive play, but his play has been a little bit limited in other areas. So I think this will really help him stay in the meta in competitive and then jump back into the meta in lower ranks. ETC, on the other hand, pretty much just mainly buffs to secondary talents that aren't normally picked, but I do think this is going to be an interesting buff because Block Party was already pretty decent, and now that they're buffing it, it's going to be a little bit better. So if you're ever going against teams that have very slow auto attacks that are high damage, check out Block Party. Garrosh, he's getting a throw cooldown increase. This is going to make it harder for him to stay in the meta because if you can prevent that first kill from a throw, then you could play a lot more aggressive against Garroshes. Then they are also buffing a lot of his lesser picked talents. They're buffing the slow on Decimate and also buffing the level 20 damage reduction as well. So there's a lot of really cool changes happening to him for all these underutilized talents. Generally, I like the changes that they've made to him. I could see him being more of a bruiser now if he wanted to be one. So if Huff Money was still playing Heroes of the Storm all the time, he would be coming back with his notorious bruiser Garrosh. Joanna, overall a buff, which is surprising to me as Joanna was being picked up a lot in competitive whenever tanks like Anub'arak and Blaze and all the, Anub'arak and Garrosh Diablo were either picked or banned. Joanna was getting really common. They're buffing Hold Your Ground again, making it almost to the point of being a must-pick talent compared to Laws of Hope, which is just essentially a really good sustain talent. Now with the amount of shield, it's over 1,000 health shield now with an extremely low cooldown of 15 seconds. It is an incredibly powerful talent. Eternal Retaliation, simply just buffing this to where it will trigger the higher cooldown reduction faster rather than having to wait for all 10 minions. You can just get it, or targets or whatever. You can get it off of fewer targets, making it a more viable option more often. Zealous Glare is getting just a little bit of a buff in terms of the duration of shield glare on that talent. Again, just buffing like underutilized talents. Radiating Faith was a ultimate upgrade that allowed it to where her ult, her spinning, or her blessed shield would hit 5 targets instead of 3, and it would increase the duration that they were stunned. It still increases the duration that they're stunned by the 33%, but it also makes it to where all 5 targets that are stunned for the full duration, which is 1.5 seconds increased by 33%, which comes out to be 2 seconds for all targets hit. A very, very powerful buff. Does this make it better than Indestructible? I don't know, but I definitely am going to start trying it out. Mal'Ganis has been nerfed several times from Blizzard, and they're coming back and they're like, you know what, let's answer this and let's drop down, let's bring him back into the game, because he got nerfed. He came out really powerful and then he got nerfed quite a few times, and now they just want to bring him back. All of his talents on every tier are seeing some change, or at least for the level 1 tier, level 7 tier, and then some slight changes on level 4 and level 16. Nothing that's really out of, like, nothing that's crazy. Just overall numbers and percentages buff, so we don't need to focus too much on this, and they've pretty much said the same thing. We've nerfed Mal'Ganis multiple times since its release, and he's fallen a bit out of meta. Myrddin has kind of fallen out of meta purely because of the other tank's priorities, so they are mainly just buffing underutilized talents on him. Nothing too crazy in here that needs to be brought up specifically, nothing that's too major. I do think this reverberation change is interesting. You now, every hero hit with Myrddin's heroic ability reduces your cooldown. Your every hero hit with your W reduces your heroic abilities cooldown by 5% per enemy, which is kind of neat, because you can drop down the cooldown of your Haymaker, which already has a pretty low cooldown, or the Avatar, you can drop that cooldown by a significant amount for each target you hit with your W. Both are pretty neat. Stitches, again, underutilized talents. They buffed all of these underutilized talents. Nothing too crazy. Chop Chop gets a slight buff. Digestive juices. This one gets a decent change. No longer increases the damage of Devour to enemy heroes, but instead hitting an enemy hero with Devour reduces its cooldown. So this is going to make him a little bit more mana intensive, but it still will allow you to heal more than what you healed before. Gas Flare, Meat Hook, all pretty straightforward, nothing too crazy. On to Imperius. Imperius, they are buffing his level 1 W talent, his level 7 Q talent. They're actually, it's more of a change on level 7 Q talent, because it's going to do slightly less damage, but it's also going to apply a shield. So he's going to be tankier if he picks up that talent, but overall, the damage is going to be a little bit different. But Consuming Flame, again, it's more of a change. They are nerfing the flat damage, but then they're essentially buffing the scaling of it. Yeah, I don't know. It's just changes on him. Malthael is getting kind of an interesting change. We're not going to really talk too much about throwing shade, but I do want to talk about these two changes. So Tormented Souls, ever since they've changed it, was a pretty good ult, but you did usually burn your mana very quickly in team fights. And it gave you this new thing where when you activate your Tormented Souls, it resets your W, and then when your Tormented Souls ends, it resets your W again. With them buffing the W talent at level 16 allows you to have a high percentage base damage that you can do to one target, while also still melting down all the other targets. So you'll be doing percent health damage to their entire team, but if you start off the fight by doing a W onto a target, then using your ult, and then Wing the same target again, and then when your ult ends, Wing the same target again, you could easily burst for about 30 to 40% of someone's health while also melting them throughout the duration of Tormented Souls. With the mana cost reduction of Tormented Souls, it should allow you to be a little bit more, I guess, liberal with your abilities and just use them a lot more during team fights. I think this is an interesting change and could be the new answer to double tank comps rather than Last Rites. Ragnaros is just getting a pretty straightforward buff, buffing his health regen, his basic attack damage, as well as buffing the upgrade to his Sulfurous Smash ultimate ability, as well as giving a cooldown reduction to Submerge. Just straightforward buffs. Shiggity, you're welcome. Rexxar. After Rexxar received his last buff, we've heard all of the same jokes again about Rexxar. Yes, we get it. Rexxar walked into a bar and there's no counter. Haha, okay. They decided after all of the changes that they made, he was dominant in the solo lane to the point that he felt uncounterable. So they're just giving him some pretty flat nerfs all the way down through health and health regen, health scaling, everything like that. Ana has been dominant in the meta ever since she got her rework that allows her to use her trait to get longer range. Her W build has been absolutely destroying everything. It's a very light nerf to Ana. I don't think it's going to take her out of the meta, and it likely won't even get her out of a permaban status in competitive. I still think she needs a little bit more than that, but at least they're looking at her. Anduin. Anduin's pretty interesting because I personally felt like outside of his level 1 talent, bold strategy, I felt everything else about Anduin was pretty balanced. He could last in pretty long fights. He was pretty decent in short or long fights. He had an okay CC and a great way to get one person out of a sticky situation every 80 seconds or so. I thought both of his ultimate abilities were extremely powerful. So other than that, really, outside of maybe nerfing bold strategy and then buffing his other level 1s to compensate, I didn't think they needed to do anything with Anduin, but they did do a few things. They dropped down his mana cost on his Q, and they increased his mana cost on what I'm guessing is his W, but there's a little bit of a typo. Level 1, they're making it to where his regen, his renew talent will now heal more. His pursued by grace will now heal more. And his bold strategy is going to increase your cooldown of your Q by an extra second. Bold strategy is still a very good talent, especially since they've buffed both of these talents, not just one of them, making this change right here a little bit less of a big deal when they are buffing both of these. Holy Reach is getting a buff. I actually recommended this go up to 150%, but I'm also not in balance, and I probably shouldn't be. So I do like that they're looking at this talent, because I like the idea of this talent, but it's just wasn't strong enough to break the Apex talent. And then level 7, the Binding Heal and Power Word Shield are getting buffs as the third talent ended up being dominant, despite the fact that I said it was a bad talent. But we've been watching competitive play, and we've noticed that it's been picked a lot. So it is the dominant talent right now. Light Bomb's getting a buff, surprising to me, because it actually was really strong. But it was mainly strong just for its stun and not necessarily for its shield. So I could definitely see that being a powerful tool. Both of his talents, other than his W talent at 13, are getting a buff, pretty much moving up his movement speed to 20% on both of them. Level 16 is getting a lot of changes. Even-handed Blessings made it to where when you landed an auto attack, it reduced the cooldown of your Q by 40%. Now it's 50%. Holy Nova, they're giving a 5% increase on its damage and healing, but ultimately, my problem wasn't the numbers, it was the range of this. Inner Focus was my go-to talent. I thought it was just busted, and they're reducing the cooldown reduction, which is going to be a slight nerf to Inner Focus, but I still think it's the go-to talent, and they are also increasing the cooldown of Lightwell. It had its uses, but overall, I think I still didn't like it because we just move around too much in fights in Heroes of the Storm. So at this tier, I still think Inner Focus is going to be the go-to for this level, but I am starting to really like this Even-handed Blessings even more. They explain a little bit of their reasonings for some of these changes. Bold strategy is going to be a difficult one to balance. I personally think that instead of making it a 2-second, I think they should have made it to where your Q costs more mana, but that's just me. Deckard Cain, really just level 20 upgrades, and there is something that you're going to notice from this point on, that a lot of the upgrades to level 20s are getting very, very powerful. So Respect the Elderly, it is going to be silencing and blinding people for 3 seconds now. That's a 50% increase in the silence and blind. It is huge. This is now a game-ending ultimate ability. It already was one, and now it's even more so. More Tornadoes allows you to get the cooldown reduction even further from getting tornadoes. So now, if you're hitting 3 targets, you can have 2 tornadoes going at a time. If you hit 5 targets, even a couple times, you could get 2 to 3 tornadoes just bouncing people back and forth. Very fascinating option for that. And then they did a slight nerf to Perfect Gem. Kharazim is getting mana cost reduce, and some interesting things. They're taking his level 13 talent and they're moving it down to level 7 and combining it with his E talent. And they're taking his level 16 W talent and they're combining it with his level 7 talent. And they're just removing both of those from those tiers. I think it's really fascinating changes because they're not essentially buffing his primary builds that have been used for a long time, but instead they're buffing some secondary builds that we didn't see very often. Once again, buffing builds for underutilized talents. Fetid Touch, Targeted Excision, as well as the Pop and Pustules are all getting buffs. So if you like those builds, they are all getting buffs. The build that I was running for Stukov tended to be pretty dominant, and they're just trying to buff all of the non-dominant talents. Nothing's too crazy here. The only one that I've been kind of thinking about is a new Targeted Excision. What they're doing is they're making it to where it also reduces the cooldown of his basic abilities, and it's making me wonder if that's going to be better than the Growing Silence talent, which is what I'm really debating right now, and I may possibly start using this instead, but we'll see. On to the next one, support. Zarya is getting just underutilized talents are being changed, and Clear Out is no longer going to increase your maximum energy, which means it's no longer going to increase your damage by a scaling percentage, but it's going to instead increase the duration of Expulsion Zone. I'm never going to take this upgrade, just as it stands, but Gravity Kills. I didn't used to take this upgrade. I used to just take Rewind. Now, if you hit your ultimate, your Gravity Bomb that pulls everyone in, it's going to silence all the enemies in there for its duration. It is going to be game ending if you can land that after level 20. So this is kind of making me want to start picking this talent from now on. Melee Assassins. Alarak, they're buffing his Q build, they're nerfing his E build, and they're giving him another form of sadism that you can get from the Show of Force trait. Level 4 talent. So at level 4, if you go Q build, you're going to get more damage, or you could go the trait build and you have another way that you can get extra sadism up to 20%. So if you wanted a more scaling option into the late game where you're still playing safe and you want to scale and have extra damage, then Show of Force is going to be a great option to a burst build. While if you want just an early game dominant one, getting your Chaos Reigns early game is going to be an incredible amount of burst damage before you get to like around level 20. Someone could do the math and find the exact level that this becomes better than this, but at the same time, it's all of this is just to try to get people shying away from the E build. Maiev has been dominant in the meta, and she's been almost permaban status in a lot of the higher ranked games. She's getting her E nerfed, and the rest of her E builds are getting buffed, but the rest of her builds are being left essentially the same. It's just E build is being buffed, getting a nerf to her E. This nerf to her E is going to lower her wave clear and her cam clear ability while doing a decent amount of lowering her damage for E. Zeratul getting a nerf to Q is going to make it to where he's less of a dominant force in the late game because he's going to be dealing less damage, less scaled damage, and less healing as you start reaching into the later games. I do also want to talk about this really quick. This talent got like 10 times better, by the way. You no longer are required to blink at the target you hit within 0.35 seconds. You can just blink at any point and get the value off of it, which is going to make it to where you can play this build a lot safer and still be melting people down. Gul'dan. Oh man, these changes. These ones are so cool and are making me really... I don't know. I'm going to be making another video on Gul'dan to play around with some of these changes, but let's talk about it. They're making the quest requirements for his other level 1 quests, the one that's not his E talent, reduced. So they're easier to get these quests completed. You can get the longer range on your Q, or you can get the bonus damage, I believe, on your W. It might be bonus healing. I can't remember right now. And they're trying to bring the W build back, which is cool. I like the W build. I get you root yourself in place, blah, 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 whatever. Bound by Shadow, the cooldown reduction is being increased. It's just a general buff for all of his builds. This is a talent that was picked in Q and E build. While Curse of Exhaustion is getting a little bit of a buff. Reign of Destruction is finally getting some love. Now it has a 1.5 second cast time, and then after you cast it, it continues going, and you can do whatever you want to. It gets a little bit of a range reduction, but honestly, the ability to be able to run around and cast abilities while your Reign of Destruction is going on could be making this talent viable, especially when you're trying to siege on a fort, or if you're on a map like Infernal Shrines and you're trying to get the shrine while the enemies are getting the shrine, constantly melting down people and going from there. Darkness Within was just a trait that you could activate, increase your damage by 25%. Now it's 30%. Overall, it's a pretty interesting change. Jaina, I will be making a video on the Jaina changes as well, as they are large enough. They're nerfing down her most meta build and her best talent in it. Jaina has a lot of burst in that build and sustained damage because of this talent. And they are buffing. I used to call this the grubby build because he would run this build even before it got like 7 buffs. He ran this build with Ice Fury Wand, where it would reduce the cooldown of your W. So what they're going to be doing is they're going to be taking what level 16 had, and they're going to be adding it to level 13's talent. And then they're going to give a new functionality to the level 16 talent. And they're also buffing Ice Fury Wand, which that makes it to where when you chill a target and you auto attack them, you will reduce the cooldown of your Blizzard by 1.5, well now 2 seconds. So your Blizzard cooldown will be significantly lower. Now your W talent at level 13 is going to increase the range and the radius. And your level 16 talent is going to make it to where your second wave does 20% more damage and your third wave does 60% more damage. That means that it's more damage on top of more damage because you have the chill on them, which is giving you more damage. So put simply, a lot of damage is going to come out of these talents. Overall, I will be making a video on the new Jaina changes, and I want to practice this to see if this is any good. Lunara, a lot of just buffing underutilized talents, but nothing that's really too crazy that we need to focus on. So I'm not going to spend too much time on any of these, and we can move on to Raynor. Same thing, underutilized talents. They're just adding functionality to reduce mana cost. I have found that after some of the Raynor changes, he does have mana problems. So what I would recommend is maybe possibly picking one of these talents. I don't think it's worth giving up Giddy Up to get debilitating rounds, but if you really want debilitating rounds, you can. But I think Giddy Up's just generally better. However, if you already have a lot of slows on your team, you don't need to take the slow talent. This could be a good pickup to make sure that you keep your mana going the entire time. So I could certainly see Raynor being an option. And then Sylvanas is seeing some nerfs to her W talent. It's getting or not her talent, just the W in general. Because of the way this scales, it seems like a very small change, but it's actually rather decent because of all of the scaling that she has. Her Q build is still going to be very scary. Her W build is still going to be scary. It's just going to be slightly less scary than it was before. And those are all of the changes. And I did shave off a second. So if you guys want to help me out, support me, and you want to save money while shopping, I recommend checking out Join Honey. Essentially, it's a tool that you can add onto any browser, and it makes it to where it will automatically apply coupons, or you click a button and it applies coupons to any of your purchase, and it will search the web for those coupons for you. You can also track different prices and all that. So if you guys want to help me out, it's completely free. Click the link in the description. Join Honey, add it to your browser, save money while shopping, and help me out. Thank you guys so much for watching. What was the biggest change you felt like? What is the most exciting thing that you want to try out of all of these changes? Let me know in the comments below, and sorry for the audio issues earlier.